Welcome to another episode of Social PR Secrets. My name is Lisa Bayer, and I will be your host. Today's guest is Steve Momorella. He is the founder of Tech Group, and we are going to be talking about a subject I have been sharing and doing presentations on for at least the past 10 years, and that topic is online newsrooms. Not just online newsrooms when it comes to news sites, but an online newsroom for a brand's website. That means it's the hub for your press releases, for your social media, for your media coverage, and for your own blog articles. Steve and I have shared multiple panels over the past few years talking about all of the main ingredients that every website should have when it comes to having an online newsroom. I would go as far as to say if you had to pick one section of a website, it would be a news section. Why? Listen up to this episode and see why Steve and I love the news section of every website. We're sharing all of our favorite social PR secrets. Enjoy. So you're seeing it first here, and I have a great guest that we've known for, I'm going to say more than 10 years.
Steve? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. We've been on the forefront together of advocating online newsrooms and brand journalism for 10 plus years. So Steve, thank you so much for being my guest today and sharing the latest and greatest of what it means to be a brand journalist, what the latest and greatest, especially in these very uncertain times. Whenever you might be listening to this, we're probably going to still be going through a transition. So Steve, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your background and about Tech Group.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, I was digging through my files and I found a presentation that you and I did from 2013.
Okay.
with PRSA. So definitely we've known each other for a long time. And as you mentioned, I'm the founder and owner of Tech Group, and we've been building online newsrooms now for 22 years. And so it's just been amazing to see the transition from something like a press release warehouse with very little graphics and targeted to 100% journalists. And we've really now shifted all the way to, all sorts of content, not press releases, features, stories, videos, photos, all sorts of content. And the target has really changed. So we used to be 100% focused on journalists. Now we're about 80% of our traffic is a consumer, a news consumer, and about 20% of the traffic is coming from journalists. So just a huge shift that we've seen. And as you mentioned, during a crisis, which obviously we've never seen a crisis like this, but during a crisis, having an area of your website or an online newsroom that is able to be enacted very quickly is so important. And companies, all of our clients, as well as anyone that has a newsroom, probably is doing something in that regard right now.
Yeah. So when I was actually writing the caption for the description for our interview today, I just realized that, so online newsrooms, that's kind of a generic term. We know what that means to us, but, maybe for digital marketers, brands, public relations professionals that are just coming onto the scene, why don't we break down exactly what we're defining as an online newsroom exactly as it relates to a brand's website?
Sure.
Versus like an online newsroom like the New York Times or, a traditional publisher.
Absolutely. I mean, just to give you some history on that, when we were at Ford Motor Company in 1998, and we were watching all of their people update their website using old text languages, something called Perl, something before even HTML, and just really doing it. And they were mailing and FedExing photos and slides and just all of this postage, and they called it the newsroom. And it was the Ford newsroom, and there was 20 people sitting there literally with scissors cutting out newspapers to make clipbooks. And we came here and we said, we need to put this online. We need to put all of your communications online, so where it's what we now call a central communications hub. So it's not just press releases, it's any type of communication, whether it might be internal or employee focused, or it might be vendors or to your sales or to your investors. So really, an online newsroom is a central communications center for all content, social media, investor relations, community relations, government relations, crisis, obviously press releases, press kits. So we've really just found that if you have one place that you ask everyone that's part of your communications team to contribute their content to that one spot, it's just better both for you internally and for the external viewer, the journalist or that news consumer or the investor, having everything in one place. And so, certainly companies have a news section of their website, but our philosophy is you should really have something that's completely standalone, completely completely separate from your infrastructure of your corporate site, so that if there is an emergency, you can still have communications with your publics.
So I guess it could be twofold. It could be looking something like thebuyergroup.com/news, and that URL would be the hub of all of the communications, whether it's the hub of social media, the hub of press releases, the hub of featured media, or you're saying a separate domain that would look like what? That would be
news dot is what the way I try to explain this to people is when someone goes to Google, what are they going to type in? They're probably going to type in Toyota News, Sprint News, Walgreens News. So having your URL be news.walgreens.com or news.sprint.com or walgreens.com/news, pretty much the same thing. Just having that word news in that top level domain is really the key for, obviously, for SEO, just for ease of use. Most people are coming to your site through a link or through an email or through something they've read. They're not necessarily just typing it in. But we found over the past 20 years, having that word news and not media or press, it used to be press room or media room. That's really gone away now. It's news. I mean, it's news.
Just news, not even newsroom. Like for the actual, like when you're on your website, like part of the navigation, not the URL.
Yes, I would say news. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different philosophies on that. Some people have created their own special thing, like Coca-Cola's newsroom is actually called The Journey. AbbVie has a newsroom called Stories with AbbVie. So you could actually brand your newsroom. But I think in terms of navigation and URL, I think people are typing in news to Google more than newsroom.
And so when you're on the homepage, what do you recommend as far as the placement of the link to news? Where do you find that?
I think it's a primary navigation item. Over the years, we've seen it from not being there at all to then it used to be under the About Us, and you would see something called news. Now I think you're seeing most people have it as a primary navigation item. Obviously at the top, if not at the bottom. Some clients like Prudential, Cigna, some of these bigger companies, they used to have it. You'd scroll all the way down to the bottom and it would say newsroom. Now it's one of their primary navigation items. I think it's important enough that it's one of the top things that your company does. Your voice, what you're speaking, how you're talking and communicating is important. And so I think it deserves top level.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, my opinion is it should be in the top navigation, above the fold versus below the fold, because just, people, isn't that the most visited piece of a website?
It can be. I mean, it depends. A lot of our clients do if you're a retail company, maybe your store, your .com where you're selling product, or just kind of your marketing and product material pages are popular. But for most companies, the news is top, or at least in the top 3.
Most visited, yeah. So I know that you do a report, a survey every year. I cover it every year in one of my articles or publications. So the most recent one that you did, what are some tips? I mean, obviously things have changed in the past week or two that maybe you want to add to, but what are journalists saying that they really want to see, and what are some takeaways actionable takeaways that a brand any size could implement right away?
Right. And I think you hit something really on the head there, is the size of the company. One of the questions that we ask every year is, as a journalist, do you only visit big companies or do you also visit small companies' newsrooms? And I think the number this year was 87% said they visit both. So a lot of times when we're talking to smaller companies, they say, oh, we're not Sprint, we're not Toyota, no one's going to look at our news. But really, I think it's the opposite. I think people will find your news. If you have a really good looking newsroom, it kind of levels the playing field. And so journalists are looking for fresh content. They're looking for updated content. It doesn't necessarily have to be from a big name. So some of the takeaways this year, as I mentioned, fresh and updated content, that was one of the big ones. Another really big one that we talk about is search. 99% of journalists say that on a newsroom, they want to see search. And the reason is because not everyone's looking for breaking news. It's not just press releases in reverse chronological order, what's hot. There's a lot of people, especially today, that are doing research. So they want to come to your site and be able to do a nice search over a date range, over a topic range. They want to search by video or by photos. So having a really nice search tool built into your newsroom is really important. Obviously, we're moving more towards video. We ask questions about video included in news releases and images including in news releases. And I think PR Newswire's decision has done a similar study where the results are just amazing. The more video you have, the more imagery you have on your newsroom, in your website, as part of your press releases, not only the more views do you get, but the more people share it. So you get that kind of extended social media sharing distribution just because you included a video or an image. And so those are things that journalists are looking for. Number one every year is contact information. People always want to know where they can contact you with a phone or an email or LinkedIn or something. So we always ask our clients, sometimes it's tough to put your phone number out there if you're a PR practitioner at a big company, but certainly making yourself available is really what journalists and really what they're looking for in case they're on a deadline, in case they need to talk to someone right away.
Yeah, and one thing that we've done and I've seen work really well is if you don't want to put your, one thing, most companies really don't have, landlines and like extensions and, that's like not really as relevant today. It's more like
Right.
people are communicating via mobile more than anything, even if they do have a whole landline system and, extensions. But what we're seeing is maybe a secondary number for the media contact, the PR person. That's the main, that would be maybe a Google Voice number that like goes straight to their email that can like notify them right away. We're also seeing a way that using Messenger to notify the, whoever is the primary contact, Facebook Messenger or some sort of SMS that's attached to just the page, just the newsroom page. Are you seeing anything like that working really well?
Yeah, I think so. I think Facebook Messenger, LinkedIn. I've been using LinkedIn a lot more lately. Messaging is a big part of something that we're adding to our platform as well. Definitely, I see that. Also, I think you had a great point. You don't want to put your personal phone number on there, so an 800 number is a great idea. Also, a lot of clients do, media@companyname.com or PR@companyname.com. That's the email. The key is that when someone does send an email, that someone on the team responds in
Right.
a kind of a timely fashion. But certainly, you don't want to put your personal phone number and email out there. But then, like you said, there's ways to do call forwarding and email forwarding aliases and things like that.
Definitely. So, fast forward to today and, we're in this pandemic situation. And I know that we're talking about doing, I'm participating in a summit with you that is going to take place. Do we know the date yet or?
It's going to be next week. We're still trying to finalize everything, but it's going to be pretty interesting. I've reached out over the weekend to about 50 people, just 50 people that I picked. You were obviously one of those 50 people that I had reached out to, and I think as of this morning I had 37 people committed. So it's pretty ridiculous, and I'm trying to just interview everyone similar to what you're doing, and then I'm just going to put together a huge webinar with all sorts of things. So I will be in touch with you. Absolutely. Very happy that you decided to join me with this.
Yes, definitely. And as soon as we know the dates, we'll promote them through our channels. And if you're listening to this and it's past the date, then I'm sure you could go back and look at the replay, and we'll post things underneath this under this post as well and give updates.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, just to be timely now. So maybe what are some things that companies need to be doing right away from a brand journalism standpoint? For example, paying attention to what content they have scheduled to, what are some like takeaways that are relevant to today?
Right. Great question. We're going to be talking about all of this. A couple things. First and foremost, anyone that uses automated scheduling for social, I personally do that with something called Hootsuite, where we create a message for the month and we just go out and kind of schedule it. So we've gone back now and really trimmed those down and haven't gone completely silent, but certainly we don't want to be, sending out some sort of automated message when the timing's bad. So that's one thing to think about. Anything you have automated scheduled emails that go out or social posts that go out, might want to take a look at those and either pause them or delete them or reschedule them to the future or something so that you just don't look like an idiot at the wrong time. The other thing I think that I'm learning with this is to communicate. Don't go silent. Obviously, you don't want to be in complete sales mode and marketing mode, but offer help. That's what I'm trying to do with this webinar. I'm not trying to pitch anyone or sell anyone on a newsroom. I've got my competitors with me on this webinar. So just try to help people and, don't go silent to where either your employees or your customers, just think you're just non-existent. So you've obviously seen a ton of emails from every company that you've ever done business with saying, here's what we're doing, here's how we're responding. And I think that's the right answer. Obviously on your website or your newsroom, being able to have something. I pulled up some screens here and I can either try to share my screen, but just someone like Walgreens is a great example, just constantly updating their newsroom with when their pharmacies are open, what kind of issues they're having there, where you can get your pharmaceuticals. Other examples, Vail Resorts and MGM Resorts, both our clients, completely. So Vail Resorts completely shut down, MGM Resorts completely shut down. However, they're working from home and they're still using their newsroom to update, although not a lot. They're just kind of keeping everyone informed and letting people know what the company is doing.
So there's a lot of companies like MGM, Disney, a lot of these travel and tourism, hospitality brands that are, basically shut down. What kind of social content are you seeing, or do you recommend if you have a recommendation that, I was just talking to my team today, and we're fortunate we don't have clients that are actually shut down, but we also want to be sensitive to, the ones that are, and we're just trying to kind of, be more in like a neutral, mindful state of mind.
Sure.
Content.
Sure. I think the only word that I can think about is help. Whatever you can do from your perspective to try to help people, try to help other practitioners, try to help your clients, maybe try to help people that you were trying to get as clients and offer any sort of service that you can. I'm reading so much as I'm getting ready to do this webinar. I'm reading a lot, and this is not my area of expertise. I need as much help as probably anyone, and so that's why I'm doing this. But I definitely see that you definitely cannot be pushing and marketing and selling to people during this time, obviously. But at the same time, I think going completely dark and completely silent is also not the answer. So
somewhere in between.
Yeah, somewhere in between, and with a good heart, trying to just to help people.
Yeah. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you in general, and like specific to these times, but in general, when it comes to online newsrooms for a brand to have a news section, we work with several e-com clients, and it looks like typically like e-com clients, e-com sites are not as apt to have a newsroom or an article section as other types of categories of brands. And so I just want to get your take. I mean, my take is I feel like it's a way to create like very rich SEO content. But if you're talking to an e-com site, let's just say health and beauty, selling health and beauty products, what are some of your ideas, or what's your take on having a newsroom for e-com sites?
I mean, we've worked with a couple, and it's amazing. It's amazing because all of your products tell stories. Everything you're doing as an e-com company is telling a story. So you can have news about your platform and how great your IT department is. You can have stories all about how people are using your product. So I really think it cuts across any type of company, whether you're a retail brick and mortar or an online, an e-commerce. We have several clients that have newsrooms that are kind of online and offline. And so I think, there's tons of content there if you have a lot of products and you have a lot of customers. So to me, I can find a reason to have a newsroom for any company.
Yeah, I would be interested if you have any good examples of, not now, but maybe you can just share them and I'll share them in the links, just different e-com, maybe in the health and beauty section category that has good examples of newsrooms that they're developing rich content, that's helpful content, educational content, and not necessarily, not every page is a sales page.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, I think, you're one of our clients, Perfectly Posh. I don't know if that's necessarily health and beauty. We've worked with a couple companies, and I can certainly send you links. But obviously, having a news area on your e-commerce site is going to detract, I guess, from people buying. So that is one where if you have a really nice looking online store, maybe news is at the bottom, or maybe it's in the about section because you don't want to see t-shirts, health products, and the news as your primary navigation, but it should be there. And I think you again hit it on the head with SEO. So if you can just get tons of news stories out there with your product names in them and as the headlines and on those blog posts or on those news stories, if you can get that information shared, it's ultimately just going to help drive sales to products.
Definitely. And then you touched, I wanted to talk about SEO real quick and then also social media. So just from an SEO perspective, what are some of the benefits of having a newsroom on your website?
Right. We get this question all the time. People think that it's worse because it's a different site, but it's not. It's having a separate site actually. And we're even advising our clients now to create a whole separate URL. Brookdale Living is a great example where they created a website called brookdalenews.com, completely separate, doesn't use their same URL. It's just a completely isolated website. And what that does is it allows you to then create content on that site and then point back and link into your corporate site. So you're kind of cross-linking between these two entities, and that ultimately helps SEO. Also, just the amount of content. One of the big things with Google and their search algorithms is freshness and the amount of content. You'll see so many kind of websites or .com sites that have the same thing on the homepage. Every day you go there, it's their homepage. With the newsroom, you're able to really put a lot of content out. Every day, your site can look totally different. It can have different stories, different videos, different highlights. So as the Google engines and spiders are coming by to scrape the site, they're seeing fresh content and new content. And so SEO also from a technical standpoint, we have a checklist of 50 items that we kind of bake into our software, everything from making sure your images have alt image tags and making sure you're using H1 and making sure your keyword density, all of that stuff for us has kind of been automated and put into the templates that we create for our customers so that everything is optimized. And so I really think a newsroom can give you a leg up because it just gives you a completely separate voice and a separate platform that you can start to grow and build your SEO with that's separate from your corporate site. You can take advantage of links from your corporate site. You can link to your corporate site, but ultimately it's, from what we've seen, it's nice to have kind of this separate entity.
Totally. And so brands all do it different. Some don't do it at all. But what is your take on if you have a blog? Is the blog part of the newsroom, part of the news section?
We think so. We do. We think so. We think it's a form of communication. It's more personal. It's also kind of more of a featured story instead of a press release. So we think it's just another section of your newsroom that obviously it's opened up. So it's not just the PR agency or it's not just the PR practitioner who's actually contributing content. Now it might be someone in the HR department. It might be the CIO's blog, or it might be the CTO's blog. And so that's just providing more content to the newsroom, centralizing it. And so we really feel that having a blog component as part of the newsroom is critical and gives a voice to other people on your team that aren't part of your communications team, but they're still part of your company.
Yeah, and I think that brands and people get tripped up on the word news, and they're just like, we don't have any news right now. Everything's terrible right now, or things aren't selling. We don't have a new product to announce. And so I think that broadening that, news into articles and featured stories and, maybe repurposing past media coverage are all ways that would fall under the broad category of news, but it doesn't necessarily have to be breaking news, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, breaking news is part of it,
Yeah.
but one of the things that I do that I've considered myself pretty good at is I can walk into a meeting with a company that I've never heard of. I can sit there on my computer and pull up their website, and I can come up with a structure to create 100 pieces of content just from looking at their site, from nothing new, from everything they have, just from repurposing things and taking research reports and breaking those down and taking videos and breaking those down. So everyone has news. Everyone has something going on every single day, whether it's internal with their teams, maybe their HR team is doing something new with Zoom, or maybe their IT department has just launched a new internal cybersecurity system. All these things are news stories for a company. And then the other one is external. So I mean, if you're a company and you're selling services and products, there's news right there. Any customer that's using your product in any way, any client that's using your service in any way, anything your vendors might be doing, your partners, there's so many ways to create news.
Let's talk about social. So how does this work into the whole social media strategy, and what are some tips that you can, how does your newsroom, then like expand out to social content? And do you keep all your social channel streams within the newsroom? Is that your recommendation?
Mm-hmm. We have. Mm-hmm. I mean, social media is a funny one. It really kind of hit the scene, I would say, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. We kind of jumped on it pretty quickly with what we call embeds. So with our newsroom, you can embed your LinkedIn channel, your Facebook channel, your Instagram and Twitter, all those into what we call a social wall. So it's really just a module in the newsroom that has all of your social media in one spot. Now, as a practitioner, you're probably not using your newsroom to post social content in that way. So what we've also done is on the back end, on the administrative dashboard, we've made it so that as you're uploading a piece of content, you click a couple check boxes and it sends it out. And those are pretty basic items, integrating the newsroom on the front end and the back end with social. But what we've really found has been interesting, and Prudential is a great example, is our clients have started creating a news Twitter account. So Prudential News or Ford News or MGM Resorts News. And it's all it is just a distribution channel. They don't really engage. They don't really do any sort of necessarily what you would consider traditional social as far as engaging and going back and forth. They purely use it as just a distribution channel. Anything from the newsroom that gets published automatically goes out to that Twitter account. And they've grown it, thousands and thousands and thousands of followers now. It's become a legitimate distribution channel. And so we see social as different, I think, than you're supposed to use it. We see it as a way to push news out onto these channels, to push videos out onto channels, to create cool graphics that can be shared on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook from your news content. And then also on the monitoring side is a big one. So we've integrated the ability, obviously, something like a Hootsuite or a Talkwalker, where you can track what is being said about your brand and then leverage that content into the newsroom to create a post or something like that. So it's all integrated throughout the newsroom, especially Twitter. We've really seen Twitter as a way to distribute content. I call social media my newsroom's distribution. I mean, it's almost like a social newswire.
We speak the same language, Steve. Oh, totally. So since you're on the subject of Twitter, so I just wanted to get your take on this. So I'm right there with you with if it makes sense to create the brand, another channel for the brand's news on Twitter. So what we're seeing with journalists, and I'm just wondering in your surveys if you're getting any feel for this. So journalists are, some of them aren't active, like they're not posting, but are they using Twitter just for monitoring and and kind of, following the brands or watching for news opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do that. I think the rule of thumb that I've seen is out of every 10 people, one person is going to post and 9 people are going to read. So a lot of people are listening and monitoring social media without ever necessarily posting, especially a journalist. I mean, journalists that I've talked with, and again, in this webinar that I'm going to do, I have 3 or 4, and I'll make sure to ask them, but they're following hashtags on Twitter, and they're setting up RSS feeds from different Twitter accounts so that they get just immediately updated with content. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to respond and like it or share it or retweet it. They're just looking for it, and they're going to use it as a story. So we've seen a lot of journalists subscribe to the Twitter news channels, just getting our clients' content.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so thank you so much for your time. I don't want to take up too much more, but I want you to talk about Tech Group and what you have to offer. And if you could also talk about, like, let's say somebody's not ready for what you're offering and they're just starting out, a smaller brand, maybe something they can do on their own.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Tech Group has been an incredible company. I mean, like I mentioned, we've been doing it for 22 years now. We were one of the first companies doing online newsrooms. I think I have about 29 competitors now. So I think we obviously did something right in kind of pushing and creating this industry. It doesn't matter if you're using Tech Group or not. I think a newsroom is important. We have a lot of clients. We've worked with many people, and so we're very experienced. But I am certainly have been on the phone with many companies where our solution just doesn't work. It's just not appropriate. If you're a small organization, if you're not really, I would say if you're not dedicated to putting out something maybe once a day or at least 3-4 times a week in terms of something, a video, a photo, something, I would use something like WordPress. To me, that's, it's a competitor of ours, which is crazy, but WordPress is a great free tool to create something. Another thing is I would recommend is create a relationship with your IT department. A lot of times the PR and the IT departments are kind of at odds with each other, or they don't really see what each other does necessarily in terms of importance. But if you have a good relationship with your IT department, you can just have them create a little area on your existing corporate site using their content management tools and just kind of build some trust there. Sometimes that works, just having a really nice news area on your corporate site, especially if you're a small company. I would recommend that. But I think it's important. I mean, I think when people are moving to more of this brand journalism approach and less away from, press releases. So that's even more of an opportunity because now you have just a huge audience, a much wider audience that you can bring and attract to your site.
Okay, I just thought of 2 more questions. So
okay.
So one, it just made me think of whether we're using Tech Group or doing it ourselves, top of fold of your news section of your site. What are some of the elements that should be top of fold?
Navigation. I think a link to a search. I think a link to sign up for email. So 2 little kind of calls to action buttons there. One to go to a search, one to be able to sign up for an email alert. As far as content, about 3 years ago, everyone went to those huge hero images, the big scroller slider images. That's kind of going away now. And I think a lot of more people are putting more content above the fold. You'd be surprised how many newsrooms I see where I pull it up on my screen and my screen is big. I mean, it's 2 feet by 1 foot big, and I'll pull up someone's newsroom, and before I scroll, there's nowhere for me to click. It's a huge image, some text, and there's nothing for me to do. I have nowhere to click. It looks good, but I have to scroll down, to do anything. So on your cell phone, imagine mobile phone, imagine how that is. So I think above the fold should be navigation, search, email. Then I think you have to have a featured story. I think you have to have a story that you're promoting today or today and tomorrow. And then the next time I come, it's a different story. And so whether you're rotating those or highlighting those, I think that featured story needs to be really front and center, and it can't be the same every day or every week. I also think video and photos, if you can somehow get some sort of photo gallery or video of the week or photo of the month or something like that, that just gives some pizzazz to the site in terms of design and having it look nice. I think that's important as well. So featured stories, multimedia, search, email alerts,
Okay.
navigate.
Okay, great. And then what's your take on, so one of our recommendations to all of our clients is that we do one paid press release a month on something that's the most newsworthy. We use e-releases. Do you have a recommendation on whether to post first that press release or a version of it on the brand newsroom and then do the paid, or vice versa? Like, there's different schools of thought here, so I'm just curious yours.
Right. I mean, I don't believe in paid releases. And here's the main reason. One of the biggest things that Google will tell you is that duplicate content is bad. So if you have a press release on your newsroom and then you go give it to a wire and it goes out on the wire and someone takes that exact same press release and puts it on their site, now you have two pieces of content. And I know there's some things you can do with the Canon tag to make it so that you're the legitimate source, but still, we feel that when someone should read your news about you that you've written, it should be on your site. And so I just really talk, and I'm probably in the minority, but I just do not believe in paying money for a news release distribution. If you start today collecting emails and making relationships with journalists, 2 years from now, you will have the same list that you're paying for. And so that's just, that's my philosophy. Of course, I'm biased. That's my company, but I've never been a fan of spending $700 for a press release. And I know you were talking, a little smaller, and maybe you do get some traffic from that. I haven't done it at the small end, but I know someone like Motorola, for example, used to spend, I think, $14,000 every quarter to put out their earnings.
Yeah.
So $56,000 a year. And they're doing all the work. They're creating the charts and the graphs. And so, companies like Coca-Cola, Netflix, Pepsi, Expedia, they've all they don't use the wire at all for their IR stuff. And they really just kind of create everything and put it on their site. And I
can see that totally. If you're a big brand, I think for the smaller brands and small to medium sized brands, I mean, I see it firsthand, the advantage of using a paid distribution selectively. And the reason for it is the one that I prefer is called e-releases, and their distribution goes out to Google News, and then it also reaches journalists who subscribe to the category of news. So if you're we work with a lot of startups and a lot of, I don't have like a Coca-Cola, but we definitely see the advantage of getting into Google News. Journalists are finding us in Google News from the Google alerts, from the keywords and optimized press releases. So this is just what we do is we do a version, like two different versions. We'll do a version on paid, that's the short version. And then we'll do like the longer version on the newsroom and link to that. So if they want more information, so that's just our process. But
absolutely. And we would call that an advisory release. So that's a lot of what our clients do. They'll post a short 200-word press release on a wire with a link back to their newsroom for the full report or the full,
change it slightly, so that it's not that headline. It's going to be a different image. That's one of the ways that we do it. So it's not falling into duplicate content so much. Or if we do, it'll go, depending on the brand, whichever one makes sense to post it first.
Right. And I think for small companies it works. And I think you said it, Google News. If you're a small company and you can show up on Google News, that's pretty nice. And if you can get a list of targeted journalists included in that e-release, I agree. If you're a company also, like you said, once a month, totally. But in between those once a month, they should be posting tons of content.
Totally. Yeah. We've seen our clients, when we're posting, let's just say once a week on their newsroom or, news/blog, their organic traffic is definitely improving and increasing and, making sure everything's optimized.
Definitely. No, I think you can see the results. That's the thing with today with Google Analytics and, measurement tools. It's pretty easy to see if what you're doing is working or not.
Yes, totally. All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much. So techgroup.com?
Yes, tekkgroup.com.
Okay, and we'll put it underneath the link of this live. And then if you're listening to the podcast, it'll be in the show notes, and watch for this event that we're going to be participating in next week. That's going to be a whole lineup talking about everything you need to know about what's happening in PR, crisis communication, and the do's and don'ts, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just trying to help practitioners that don't have kind of maybe the experience that you and I do. And there's a lot of them out there that I've talked to that they've never been anything like this, and they just don't know necessarily how to communicate, and so we're giving tips, strategies, examples, and just thought leaders, just sharing it, whatever they can.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, Steve. Be well during the time, and I'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Social PR Secrets. If you like what you heard, check out the book on Amazon or follow our blog at socialprsecrets.com. This episode was sponsored by The Buyer Group, a social PR agency striving to keep our balance in the digital world, practicing public relations, social media, and search marketing, while occasionally drinking a glass of wine or two for the best creativity and results. Thank you all for tuning in. If you would like to get a free chapter of Social PR Secrets, go to socialprsecrets.com/free.